Hello and welcome, and thank you for joining us at the Dark Reading News Desk at Black Hat USA 2025. Next up, I am very happy to welcome IEEE Senior Member, CISO in Residence at Hyperproof, Kayne McGladrey. He is here to give us some practical insights on the rising role in cybersecurity operations and hopefully give us a gut check on where we really are. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I always love these, and it's such a privilege to be talking with you today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that very much. Now, I want you, I guess I'm setting you up. Here I am, I'm teeing you up. Can you help us understand, first, if you could tell us a little bit about what the IEEE is doing in the AI space, and then maybe kind of give us an overview of where you see where we are right now.
Fantastic, sure. So what the IEEE is doing in terms of artificial intelligence is putting out standards and publications for how we should be thinking about acquiring artificial intelligence systems, AI systems. And there's a lot of third-party risk management or vendor risk management guidance being provided today. The IEEE as a standards body is helping to write some of those guiding formational documents that CISOs and other practitioners should use. And then at Hyperproof, we're taking a lot of those and it's informing our strategy for how companies should be managing both the risks, but also some of the potential benefits associated with the use of artificial intelligence inside of their organizations.
So where are you where was the starting point? I mean, you say standard, I mean, that's a lot. So is there low hanging fruit here where if I'm a cyber professional in an enterprise where I can start to look like, okay, I want to get my house in order. These are the standards maybe I should focus on most critically?
There is, and I will not try and quote them off by number, but
Sure.
The IEEE, if you search vendor risk management or AI acquisition, the IEEE has a number of standards on that. And all of them are going to come down to a fundamental understanding of an organization's risk tolerance and an organization's risk acceptance. And if you don't have those understood, it's going to be a fairly difficult time to be looking at acquiring AI systems. What I think about is prior to Ford Motor Company becoming the dominant force that they are in about early 1900s, there were dozens of companies and they were making cars. They made weird looking cars, they made trucks, they made this type of wheel, that type of wheel, this type of engine. Nobody knew what a car was. And then the Ford Model T came out and we saw market consolidation. And what we're seeing right now in artificial intelligence is the same challenge, but we're seeing I'm going to bifurcate this, of being distributed risk and then the potentiality of centralized risk. Right now, there is a high amount of free cash from VCs, the investor class, flowing into all of this wonderful innovation in AI. Not all of those companies are going to be here in 2 years. Not all of those companies are going to be here at the next Black Hat. They are going to eventually be consolidated into a larger entity, which I can't predict what that would be. My magic 8-ball is unfortunately broken. But what I'd say to practitioners right now is we're evaluating which AIs we want to use. You need to think about what's their financial viability long-term. I've seen a few vendors where ultimately their automation feels like you could have scripted it 5 years ago at a cheaper cost. They probably aren't going to be around. And then what level of risk is acceptable to have that level of innovation, knowing that they might stop existing? When the free money spigot turns off and we get the consolidation motion, I think we're going to have to look at that centralization of risk. Of if you have outsourced or moved a number of your business functions to whoever your AI provider of choice is, who's made it through your processes, are you willing to accept the notion that you can outsource the business function but not necessarily the responsibility for that business function? And this is one of those things where CISOs get out over their skis very quickly.
Right.
And I'd recommend go have a talk with counsel, because let's say you outsource most of your marketing. Let's say you have a PR disaster. You cannot go back to your AI vendor and say, well, it's your fault. They're going to have contractual limits of liability that say, actually, no, we gave you a tool. You chose what to do with the tool there.
Right.
Or if you have a material breach caused by a third party, again, if it's an AI, like we're seeing in the Delta versus SolarWinds thing, we're going to see this consolidation of risk where a limit of liability is going to say, even though you outsource this function, whatever it might be in security or any other business function, you're still going to be found at fault. And I think that's where, as security practitioners, we have to be willing to have a risk-based conversation with companies and then track those risks, get all the other business leaders to agree on them and say, hey, do we feel good about this or do we not feel good about it?
It's really interesting the way you sort of broke that out, because these are two areas that enterprises are really struggling with beyond AI, right? I mean, finding out our appetite for risk versus, reward, that is a sort of a new conversation. The conversation CISOs need to have about risk management rather than technical. Is that a mature enough conversation that's been had to where these companies can confidently say what their appetite for risk is in this sort of instance?
When I think about it that way, I think about Enron and I think about WorldCom, which gave us Sarbanes-Oxley of 2002,
Right.
which forced companies to say, look, the board needs to have oversight of risk. You all have to look at this at a bare bones minimum, and if you're Delaware, you get the Caremark and the Chancery Court, which is so much fun, but we won't go there. But a lot of companies aren't publicly traded. They
Right.
just say, I'm a new company, I'm a little guy, I want to go get my SOC 2, Type 2, and it'll be cool because now I can sell to other businesses. And unfortunately, SOC 2 still has that same fundamental requirement of you need to have human oversight of risk, you need to have an informed opinion, and the board has to have some participation in that as well as senior management. CISOs need to be prepared to have this conversation, because if they're not, I think it's a failure of duty, because ultimately CISOs who get hauled up in front of somebody will be asked, why did the organization not control this cybersecurity risk with this breach of some vendor? And it comes down to an organizational misalignment of tolerance of risk.
So talk to me, and I think this is probably a very critical piece of advice I'm going to ask you for our audience. It's sort of the punchline now, AI, and we all eye roll, but it is everywhere, and it is whether it's being stapled onto the side of the booth just to be in, or it's really a mission critical focus, it's being bandied about very casually. So what advice would you give, these CISOs and these security practitioners who, to your point, are really trying to decide what AI can do, what it can do for me, and what I'm comfortable having it do? What is that decision tree? What should that look like, or what would you advise it to look like?
So what I always tell CISOs is go make friends with counsel, go have a cup of coffee with them.
I'm hearing that a lot.
They're all very nice people. They put their pants on in the morning the same way everybody else does, one leg after the other, and evaluate where they are on this. Form that relationship first and foremost to understand what their guidance is. And then beyond that, just because it can be done with AI doesn't necessarily mean it should be done.
So you
with
are not
AI.
a proponent of this experimentation and innovation.
With some instances, yes. So let me give you two very different examples.
Great.
I was talking with a vendor, and they were going to automate MDR, managed detection and response, and they were going to not only do detections through AI, but also eviction engineering through AI.
Okay.
Fascinating topic, and I've been part of some evictions. They are not exactly fun to go fight hand and fist against the North Koreans in a digital environment. That kind of sucks.
Yeah,
It's tiresome, and they move pretty quick. So AI in that case is an obvious force accelerator, and there's business benefit and business value. If you compare it with, let's have an AI do an evaluation of my corporate risk register and assign other executives the responsibility for managing these risks and go suggest some controls, black box, and the computer told me it was fine. I think if you look at the DOJ's corporate sentencing agreements or their guidance or their evaluation of corporate compliance programs, the law does not allow for, this is me paraphrasing, this is not legal advice, but the law generally does not permit this use case. So that's where we have to start looking at it thoughtfully and say, is this technology appropriate for this function? And if it's not, we have to be willing to say with conviction, this is not the right thing we should do. We inherit more risk than we get from reward from this.
Is that something boards want to hear right now?
Oh, heck no.
I'm
Heck no.
imagining
Everybody
a
wants
CISO
AI, all
going in, yeah.
singing, all dancing AI. It's
Yeah.
great. And if you look at what the S&P companies recently came out with in their most recent reporting quarter, 1/3 of them said they don't know if they're going to make any of their money back on this AI investment. They think maybe it'll work and maybe they won't. And I think that becomes a material problem for investors who are going to say, wait a second, you're spending money on something that we don't even know is going to work. And we know we've got market concentration coming up. We have to be thoughtful at where we're using AI. We can't give it everything. We shouldn't give it everything. We still need to have cases where a human is very much in the loop. And the other thing I'd say is we can't say, well, I'll just write a policy document and it'll be good enough.
Right.
And I think of the Johnson versus Dunn case out of Alabama recently, where lawyers who have ethics, they have guidelines, they go through a ton of training, scary amounts of training of here's what's okay to do and here's what you shouldn't do. They had policies that said, well, we're not going to use AI because it could hallucinate. And they had policies that said, well, we're going to go have somebody evaluate the outputs and we're going to make sure it's all cool. 3 of their attorneys got sanctioned. And now from here on out, have to tell judges and plaintiffs that, hey, yeah, we're the guys who used AI at full on made up stuff. And we thought that was cool. And they have a $40 million contract that is imperiled from this inappropriate use of AI from, again, very smart, talented, well-meaning people. If lawyers are susceptible to this, any organization that thinks they can put up a policy and go, yeah, it's good enough, they're going to have a bad time.
Thank you so much for giving us this reality check. And being thoughtful, that is what I'm taking away from you. Be thoughtful, be considerate, and be very concerted in your AI efforts as you move forward. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. And it's really informing our product direction at Hyperproof, where we're seeing a lot of the companies in the space just YOLO money into AI without thinking of the effect that it's going to have on their capital burn rate, or without thinking, because we're in governance, risk, and compliance. You have to be thoughtful about this. We can't do things that would imperil our clients to face litigation risks or to face regulatory oversight risks. That'd be a dereliction of duty on our part.
Yeah.
We have to be intentional about this space.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you
I
for
very
having me.
much appreciate you being here and giving us such in-depth insights. I appreciate it very much.
So good to see you.
This has been the Dark Reading News Desk here at Black Hat USA 2025. Thank you so much for joining us.